So you'll also see in the chat a message about the land acknowledgement. So the School Leaders of Color Conference wants to acknowledge that those of us here in the US are on the traditional territory of Indigenous people. I myself am in Dallas, Texas, and I want to respectfully acknowledge the Caddo, Wichita, Kiowa, and Comanche people who have stewarded this land throughout generations. I also want to acknowledge that our nation is still in the midst of a global pandemic which is affecting disproportionately communities of color, and all of us as individuals. So with that said, I understand that we're all experiencing different situations and impacts. So feel free and feel encouraged to take care of yourself during the session and extend grace to one another. Thank you so much, Sonia, for posting that information in the chat for us. So if you're here, that means you are here for our combating anti-Asian American Pacific Islander discrimination and hate. And I am Nancy Tien. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a 2013 core member from TFA DFW. I'm a board member with Act to Change. My day job is education consulting and coordinating advocacy initiatives. And a fun fact about me is I will forever be a Blink, or also known as a fan of Blackpink. I'll pass it off to my friend Richard.
Thanks for sharing that, Nancy. I remember the first time we met, you shared that was your fun fact, and I was like, I'm going to remember this because this is something we can connect about. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to meet all of you, sort of, meeting, Zoom, virtual, all of that. But I'm excited that you're here, and I'm grateful that you're here. My name is Richard. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I was a Twin Cities 2014 core member. And like Nancy, I'm a board member here at Act to Change. You'll hear more about Act to Change in a little bit, but for my professional day job, I'm a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant and a leadership identity coach, serving primarily Asian Americans and other people of color. Fun fact, yes, I'm an excessive boba drinker. Ever since the pandemic started, I've been getting about one a day, which is like really unhealthy. I know it's really bad, but I can't help myself.
And we'd love to invite, and I'm an excessive boba drinker, and I'm jealous. One a day is really, really up there.
Don't be jealous. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing.
I do one a week. But I'd love to welcome our participants who are in here, and if y'all could come off mute and introduce yourselves. If you're a core member or alumni, share your core year. If not, just share like where you're coming from and what got you engaged in the School Leaders of Color Conference. I guess I should popcorn it off to Yeji. Please correct me if I said your name. Okay.
Oh no, that was correct. My name is Yeji. I am a 2016 Boston core member, and currently I work at my placement school as a STEM instructional coach. And particularly, I work at a school named the Academy of the Pacific Rim, but we serve Black students mostly. And so there was like this weird relationship that I, as an Asian staff member, had at my school. And this year, I took the opportunity to take the teachers at our school and create affinity spaces. And so we often talk about our identity as Asian teachers, knowing the racism that has run rampant in our country since the pandemic, but also juggling with the fact that we are serving Black and Brown kids and like how we deal with that relationship and that the whole, what has been brought on by the pandemic in general. So this session really interested me around that topic, and hopefully I learn and I continue to work with and educate and learn with like the Asian American teachers at my school.
Thanks. Can you popcorn it off to somebody else?
Anthony.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm a 2013 Las Vegas core member. I am a district administrator for a charter network here in Vegas. One thing I am is actually in charge of discipline for the entire network, and I have quite a few Asian American students, so it's been interesting to see the cases that have gone through my hands with COVID. So I think this is something that'll be helpful for me to take in, and I'm excited to learn some things new. I'm gonna popcorn it to Imer. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
That's okay. Hi, my first name is Emer, last name is Ravelo, and I am a principal in Las Vegas at a middle school on the east side. And actually, I am not a TFA alum. I was invited to be here, I guess, being a leader of color, because I have quite a few TFA folks who come through. I usually invite them and have cohorts here at my school. So I was just interested in the conversation. And so thank you.
Thanks so much, Amir and Anthony, for sharing. And that leaves Suprita. Hi, Suprita.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for hopping on a little later. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Sukrita. I use she, they pronouns. I'm based out in Chicago, and I work at Teacher America. I lead our Asian American and Pacific Islander community alliances, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's an ongoing one in the work that I've been doing, and I'm really excited to hear from both Richard and Nancy, as just like folks I really like look up to and see doing a lot of this type of work. I'm really trying to hear from folks to see like what strategies are y'all using, how are y'all experiencing this, and what do you think it looks like to start building and engaging in safer environments for students.
Awesome. Great. Thank you all so much for doing a round of introductions. And I'm actually going to pass it off to Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. Thanks all. I really appreciate the intros. It helps to sort of contextualize and think through where we're at. Oh, sorry, Nancy, could we pull back one quick slide? Let me just spend 1 second here. So in terms of an overview of how we're going to run through, we structured this workshop to, and I love that actually the fact that we're kind of a smaller group here, so we can really sort of respond to what folks are looking for. In terms of what we're going to move through here, we'll move into just kind of getting a quick grounding and quick sort of check in with each of us on the rise of anti-Asian sentiment over the course of the last year. And then Nancy has actually curated like a fantabulous list of resources to combat hate in schools, and she'll be able to give you an overview of that, as well as give you all some time to go through it yourselves. And then we'll come back together to kind of just share where we're at. I really love Suprita mentioning that this is, a conversation that is ongoing. And I think that in the spirit of that, what we're trying to do here is really have a space for us to bring some dedicated space and time to it. Oftentimes issues that disproportionately impact the API community aren't given enough space and time. And so I'm just excited for the chance to be able to just dedicate the rest of our hour together on this. So a little bit of background before we kind of dive into all those things, just a little bit more about Act to Change, which is the organization that Nancy and I are both part of, and was sort of how we were able to get connected into this work conference and be here with all of you. So Act to Change is a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission statement is here. We envision a world where all youth, including within the AAPI community, have the opportunity to grow up feeling proud and supported in the development of their identity and sharing of their stories. On the next slide, you'll see one of the things that kind of makes me really excited to be a part of Act to Change always is that the history of this organization is deeply interconnected, both with the White House initiative on AAPIs, which was where Act to Change began under the Obama administration. And then from the beginning, the ANHPI alliances at TFA have been a critical partner of Act to Change, even before it was its own standalone 501c3, which it is now. So I'm just always excited to share these spaces, especially as somebody that's on the board and was a core member and still is deeply connected to the education community. Literally all of my friends are teachers. I have no friends that are not teachers. So like these are the spaces that I love to be in. In terms of some of the stuff that y'all might have seen or heard from us, we've been doing a lot of digital events, and I'm actually really, really proud of this. This is like a very not humble, self-brag thing here. Ever since the pandemic started, there have been lots of organizations that have done lots of virtual calls and town halls, and they've been great. I love them. But I have to admit that from the beginning, I think here at Act to Change, we've taken two intentional focuses that have set us a little bit different. Number one, we've shied away from the sort of marathon of incredibly amazing, powerful speakers and focused more on smaller, intimate gatherings, more intimate, more authentic conversations. And number two, as a youth-facing and youth-centric organization, what we've really tried to do, and this has been a challenge, I'm not going to lie, this is hard, and we haven't always done it right, but we're getting better at it, I think, is that we are really trying to uplift young folks. And so over the last few workshops and conversations and virtual events that we've had the chance to connect with students, mostly API students across the country, and bring them in conversation with each other as well as cool celebrities. I remember the first time we did this, we had a couple of students out of New York City chatting with Hudson Yang. And the students were so nervous beforehand. I was like, is this gonna go okay? And it ended up being like amazing because, you know, these folks, they just need opportunities to connect with one another. So I would recommend y'all check us out for those kinds of things. We're also running right now a digital art exhibition that y'all and your students and your communities are more than welcome to be a part of. It is gonna wrap soon. The end date deadline is, you'll see it later in our slides, but I think it's next week or 2 weeks from now. But that one's really exciting because we just signed on a big influencer, Bretman Rock, to help us with that. And there's going to actually be a call between Bretman Rock and some of the winners, or not winners, I should say, some of the folks that are featured out of this art exhibition. The whole point is around designing art that could go on a face mask. And lastly, this is the last sort of focus we've been doing. We've been trying to put out a lot more curriculum and resources to support educators. Literally, because of the history of the organization, literally more than half actually of Act to Change board members are all former educators, most of whom through TFA's network. And so it is very much on our minds of putting out the resources that we ourselves really needed when we were in the classroom, or if we still are in the classroom. So all that is to say, lots of things to plug, and hope y'all stay engaged with us even after today's conversation. Thanks, Nancy. We can go ahead and push straight up into the rise of anti-Asian sentiment. So what we're going to see here is I wanted to show you all a little bit of data and a little bit of information that was compiled by some of our friends over at Stop AAPI Hate. And if you've never heard of them before, Stop AAPI Hate is a coalition between a couple of different nonprofits and a couple of different colleges and they established one of the first sort of nationwide trackers of anti-Asian and Pacific Islander, but mostly Asian, if I'm being honest, hate incidents. Especially because so many folks within our community, and I use the word our just in the sense that I identify as Asian American, because there are so many folks within our community that either do not feel safe, do not feel comfortable, or do not know how to access other ways of reporting incidents, it was really important for Stop AAPI to create a one-stop sort of resource for folks to be able to name what was happening. This is not a story that I share that often, but like, I remember last year during May, during Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, I remember sort of sitting there and like reading news article after news article of like things that were happening, of elders getting attacked on public transportation, of kids getting bullied and all of that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, God, this is just like the worst APOM ever. Like, it sucks out there. And now that we've been in this pandemic for a while and things have changed politically in this country and all of that, I find myself going back to Stop AAPI Hate just as a resource to reground myself in what is happening because the reports are still coming in. Anyway, that's the context. What you see in front of you are two quotes that we pulled out of their report, both by young folks, one by a 17-year-old and one by a 13-year-old. Both speaking to the fear and the anxiety and the very real hate that is out there. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. And then I'll pause here to let you read these as well. These are also two quotes that came from students. Thanks so much, Nancy. Can you move us to the next slide now? Just a couple of top line numbers as well that really came out of this report that I found myself struck by, and there's a lot more in it. We'll give you the link to it later so you can review it at your own time. But just a couple things that I'd love to put in front of you. 1 in 4 folks that were interviewed over the course of this summer experienced discrimination and hate. 73% of them felt anger about the rise in anti-AAPI hate. 21% of hate incidents were done online, especially because of the way schools were shut down. And while adults were present in almost half of the incidents, 48%, only in 10% of them did any sort of bystander intervene in what was happening, right? And so I just wanted to present these numbers with y'all, and I wanted to pause here to ask, how have you seen the rise of anti-Asian hate over the course of the last year, and what are you seeing in your communities and your schools? How are your students, families, and the folks in your community experiencing it? If anyone has something they want to share, reflections, reactions, feel free to come off mute. We'll go ahead and stop sharing screen here as well so we can all focus on seeing each other.
If I don't mind sharing something here, I like remembering, or I remember the first time that like the news of the virus began spreading at school. And the way like I realized that the students knew about it is because I would walk the halls during transition times, and I would witness or I would always say hi to the fellow Asian American students. Like they like built this cohort and always checked in with me during hallway transitions. But at one moment, I was in the middle of saying hi to one of them, and one of their friends ran by and like came up and like said hi, but at the same time like said, um, don't talk to her, she's got the virus." And us both being Asian American just looked at each other in shock. And like I tried my best to just ask like, "I'm sorry, I don't believe what you just said." But for me to hear that as a joke from one friend to another, and the kids are both in middle school, I couldn't imagine like what were the ramifications were for the student I was talking to, who's like trying to process her identity, and like just be a middle schooler.
This is Emer. Just to respond to your questions, which mine is an age thing, and another turned 50, so I only remember one of the two questions, but I'm gonna try and answer that. So to follow up with Nancy and Richard's intro, the school that I work at is mostly yes, students of color, but mainly Hispanic, predominantly, and then also African Americans. So but I'm not naive enough to think that that's not going on for, my handful of Asian American Pacific Islanders, right, or multi-race students. So I'm sure that when we were ramping up before our closure, that incidences like that happened, right, that I may not have seen, but I certainly know that was going around because that's what was being portrayed in social media, right? Like that all the middle schoolers are on it somehow, somewhere, right? And so feeling it and knowing that, wow, that's, they're blaming it on, a certain part of the country or world, and that would hit here. So certainly I know that was going on, but because I'm not in a neighborhood or necessarily in a school that has a large number of Asian American Pacific Islanders, that even I don't see that because I live in the neighborhood, that's happening, right? But certainly know that this is a microcosm and that is in Las Vegas just like any other place.
Kind of to piggyback on that, I know in Las Vegas, a lot of our big casinos, they kind of celebrate Chinese New Year. And last year's the Year of the Rat, and in the Venetian, they had a big old rat statue there. And someone photoshopped in like local Vegas social media a mask over the rat's face, basically, like kind of a play on coronavirus. It's because of the Chinese people. And just reading the comments from the adults, they were like, it's just a joke. And then a lot of Asian people were saying, oh no, that's racist. And white people are like, no, that's not racist. Of course. And then, I was like, oh, this is going to be an issue, because if the parents, the adults are saying this, it's going to trickle down to the kids, that they think that they can just say this on the spot. And I noticed that right away, February, March, just those things and having to shut it down. And, fortunately, I think a lot of my principals, they are Muslim, and they understood that, you know, things like this is how it starts, and we have to shut it down right away. So luckily, you know, had strong allies that I work with, but, you know, we definitely, you know, we faced it in last February, last March, and it was definitely eye-opening, because, you know, these are elementary school, middle school age kids, and they're so young, but I mean, just the trauma that could bring to somebody as they get older, that's, you know, that can be a shock.
For me, because my school population, I don't think I taught a single Asian identifying student last year in my grade. And the thing was, and often I feel like now my school is more diverse and we have definitely plenty of more Asian identifying teachers, but before, I was the only one on like my school floor. And so I felt like I had the weight of expectation and like everyone wanting to know the questions and the answers and things like that, like on my shoulder. And so, you know, I have a good enough relationship with my students. Like no one would say anything blatantly to me, but like I would hear them joke about it and things like that. And I had to humanize it for them because to them it was this far away thing that didn't bother them or didn't impact them. But my parents actually live in South Korea. And so like I had to have like a real conversation with them about like why their words and their jokes impacted me in a way that they didn't necessarily mean it to. So I had to be like, this is my experience. These are like my parents who are affected. This is how I'm affected. But the thing is, not all of all students have an experience and relationship with someone to help them realize their jokes and the impact of their jokes, especially when you live in a very a community that's very like one like race, gender, not gender, race and ethnicity. So, but then it was exhausting that I had to constantly feel like I had to explain it and humanize the event, that this is an event that is actually happening to real people. And it's not a joke. And so after a while, it just became like I would pretend to not hear things because being on guard all the time was just such an exhausting experience for me.
Thank you all so much for sharing that. And it's it feels so like heavy to like be in education work, and then also like realize that we're combating so many systems of oppression through education. And so I'm sending y'all like good vibes and so much like hope, because you guys are providing actually a great, y'all are providing a great segue into like the strategies that we've been able to find, and even resources that nonprofits have put together for educators and for youth. So let me share my screen again. I feel like every time I use Zoom, it's like the first time I use Zoom. So I got to look and see quite a few resources that are very helpful for educators. So there are orgs across the US seeking to address the problem of like hate and bias in our schools. And then even one more step ahead is that they're creating tools to equip educators and youth. And so two great resources I found are the Stop AAPI Hate Youth Campaign report, and by the org that Richard mentioned earlier. And then they actually just changed their name. So Teaching Tolerance is now known as Learning for Justice, but they have a great resource on responding to hate, bias, and bullying. At the end of this, we'll be giving y'all time to run through the resources. So I have a specific slide with the links. And while I'm sharing an overview of the resources, keep your eye out for anything that feels immediately accessible or something that resonates with you, so that you can dig into it during the time that we have. Great. So among the recommendations, there were 3 major buckets of strategies that I saw to combat hate and discrimination. The 3 being staff and climate, addressing staff and climate, amplifying student voice, and using your position in education to advocate for students. With staff and climate, there was 4 basic recommendations, and actually y'all have touched on this already. Being vigilant about your climate and culture, knowing that things are definitely happening on your campus, listening, watching for signs, and even engaging in conversations with staff and students for like microaggressions or incidents of just negative culture. And really important that I have seen in my experience is that oftentimes things don't get addressed. They are not outright denounced. They're not ever. We never see like formal responses, and so that's something as a part of staying vigilant is actually respond to incidents of hate, racism, bullying in very like transparent ways, because that builds a positive climate culture, and in turn allows students to feel safe and feel included. For a resource for staying vigilant and building a positive culture, there's actually a climate survey included at the end. The other strategy is interrogating your practices. So asking yourself, are there practices preventing inclusive representation among staff and student leaders? Are your systems and structures holding individuals accountable and not reinforcing subjectivity and bias? And I think, Anthony, you kind of highlighted this idea of like looking at discipline systems, which in education we've seen as a major system that perpetuates like inequity. A resource for this is an equity audit that educators can easily do with their staff on campus. The next two bullets kind of go together. Staff should serve as allies and role models and be equipped through anti-bullying and anti-hate training, and also lead students through similar anti-bullying training. So in a report from the Bullying Prevention Task Force in 2016, Asian American and Pacific Islander students often shared that they didn't want to report bullying instances because either they feared retaliation, they were wary that the staff was going to be ineffective in response, or that staff just didn't care. And when we are able to equip our staff with a training and give them ways to address hate, harassment, and racism and bullying, then students are able to see that there are ways of building safe and inclusive classroom environments and school culture. Something that I saw was developing an anonymous reporting and monitoring system that's available to both students and staff, and monitor repeat harassers and repeat victims. And it was so, going through this process of like putting together resources was actually very therapeutic, because I was like kind of going back and looking through the ways how I as an educator saw like staff not be accountable or vigilant about it. And I don't know if it was therapeutic, actually, it was maybe a little bit traumatizing. But I saw like the effectiveness that these strategies can really have on a campus, or I envisioned it. The next one I'm a huge personal fan of in my own work is amplifying student voice. And the couple of strategies here, and these are actually 3 recommendations put forward by youth researchers that worked with Stop AAPI Hate. So the youth recommended, I'm sorry, do y'all see that message, that thing? Okay, I don't want y'all to see any notifications. So the 3 recommendations that the youth researchers came up with were implementing restorative justice programming at the school. This programming emphasizes peer mediation and student-driven solutions, and it can be especially helpful for your Asian American Pacific Islander students, or any students of a marginalized group, because their voice is used to develop the actual solutions. And the outcomes that way, instead of coming from a staff perspective or a majority culture lens, can allow for culturally appropriate outcomes and sustainable outcomes. The next 2 bullets are ensuring that your campus has student leadership structures and student-led campaigns. Actually supporting students by providing staff and staff assistance in space and time, and training for students to be able to embrace like feedback and what it looks like to work with staff and staff leader or school leaders. The last one, Yaji, you kind of touched on, is affinity groups. I'm not sure if like y'all have seen student affinity groups. I kind of informally had one as a teacher in my last campus, and I didn't realize the power that it had until I saw the joy that came with the students when they entered the space that we had. So student affinity groups, much like staff affinity groups, allow whoever that engaged in those groups to share their experiences based off a shared identity, and they engage in learning or discussion or problem solving around specific issues. And there's a resource to leading student or launching student affinity groups that will be included in the end. And we also have a toolkit for that included for youth to address hate. And then my last slide is using your positions to advocate. So because we live in the United States, hate, racism, and discrimination is really pervasive because our local, state, and federal systems upholds like white supremacy, right? And when that happens, like we really can't eliminate hate and bias unless we address the policies that allow it. And so there are areas where, in education specifically, where you all as educators and your students hold more influence in local offices because there's more power to make education decisions at the state and city level. My own my own recent reflection was that we had as a state, the Texas Education Agency recommended that local districts all engage or all implement policy that that bans LGBTQ discrimination for employees. Well, during the pandemic, there wasn't really a way to enforce this. And so school boards actually met virtually and like kind of behind this, or not behind the scenes, but under the radar, and actually voted against including the inclusive language. And because of something else going on, like no one was really there to hold them accountable. So just realizing that your positions, educators, can really sway local elected officials into supporting anti-discrimination and inclusive policies, or to address like anti-Asian American Pacific Islander hate or just other discriminatory practices. Also supporting diverse inclusive curriculum, something like supporting ethnic studies, which youth actually are documented in seeing something as something that they desire. I see it come up over and over again in my work organizing with students. And it also is just great for all students, students that identify as people of color or Black or Indigenous, or students identify as white. There's research that when students engage in learning beyond their own identity, they're able to take on more of a social or more interpersonal skills and being more empathetic, which is I think what Yeji was sharing about like how she had to share her story of humanizing her experience. And this curriculum can also include anti-bullying curriculum or social emotional learning or restorative justice. Last but not least is always taking any opportunity to amplify student voices, inviting them to have conversations with elected officials or district administration. Having worked in education advocacy for a few years now, I've seen that whenever students enter a space, they really draw a different kind of attention because their narratives are so unique and so raw that oftentimes like people are really quick to sway and support them. Whew, I just said a lot. I'm going to go ahead and share the link, or maybe Richard, if you have it, you can share the link in the bio. So we've prepared this slide for you, and you should be able to click any of the resources here. I think we're pretty good on time. Yeah, so we can give you 5 minutes on our timer for you to click a resource, dig into it, see how it might help you, or find another resource that you might like. And then at the end, we'll come back and kind of share. Are there any questions on what I just mentioned? Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, and I see folks are already clicking into some of these links here. So just one piece of framing. You know, Nancy and I go to a lot of these conferences. We're aware how these usually work, right? A lot of folks get their resources at the end and then they go. This is not that. The intention here is actually for us to be able to come back afterwards and be able to have a discussion about the things that you're looking over here to see what feels right, what feels actionable, what you still have questions on in terms of like being able to make it a reality. So really encourage you to spend the next 5 minutes going through these and thinking through, you know, what speaks to you in terms of something that feels like something you'd want to implement.
I will play us some music. Thank you, Richard.
You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. Them bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie. Oh my, time heals all, but you out of time now. Judge gotta watch us from the clock tower. Little tear gas cleared the whole place out. I'll be back with the hazmat for the next round. We was trying to protest and
All right, that's time. Would anybody like more time? We have about 20 minutes together still, I think. 25? I can't do maths.
I was just on the last column, so maybe about 5 more minutes, if you would.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much. So 5 more minutes, we'll come back at 2:50 Central Time.
you should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire.
Yeah, I just wanna focus on my goal. I ain't got no time, I gotta work. Yeah, rent is coming up, I need this cash. Plus I got a couple terminations in my past, yeah. Gotta ask my bosses for a day off. But if I do, I know I might get laid off. I just wanna focus on my goal. I just wanna focus on my goal, yeah. Cause now I'm holding up, but I ain't on so many things were gonna hold me up. Wanted to rock the vote when I was growing up. Now they hit the re-rock, now they slow me up. I just wanna get to the ballot, I just wanna feel like I'm valid. Put in my vote, I can have it, but that shouldn't feel like magic. It's the best way to make my voice heard, and that should be automatic. That's my American right? I'm flexing my right if I got it. I got it. Yeah, I just wanna focus on my goal. I ain't got no time, I gotta work. Yeah, rent is coming up, I need this cash. Plus I got a couple terminations in my past, yeah. Gotta ask my bosses for a day off. But if I do, I know I might get laid off. wanna focus on my vote. I just wanna focus on my vote. I just wanna focus on my vote. Yeah, I just wanna focus on my vote.
Great. We're going to bring everybody back. Oh, I should share my screen again. Apologies. It's taking a little longer. Okay, here we go. Great. Oh, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Yeah. So welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good time sort of just going through some of those resources, and hopefully they sparked some thoughts. Love to start with that first question there. Just what caught your attention from all the resources that Nancy put together? Any thoughts, reactions? What caught your attention?
For myself, I like the advocacy ones. They really did catch my attention, just because I know as for the organization I work with, they're slow on that front, so to speak. Like for example, I had to pull tooth and nail to have us release our Black Lives Matter statement during the George Floyd protests. So I know that's for them. It takes time along those lines for any sort of advocacy on that front, but that's a really helpful starting point that I can and get to my coworkers and see that this is doable. So I appreciate that.
It's funny. I think we. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think for me, right, so I've been aware of Teaching Tolerance, that website, and the pieces that they publish, but I wasn't aware of the depth. And so I was looking at I don't know if they call it the manual, responding to hate and bias, right? And so for me, as far as it's written for a school administrator, so I guess that's kind of caught my attention. Like, ooh, that's something that I, need to take a look at and see, because I'm actually have just started at my school pieces as far as addressing equity and being an equitable leader, and looking at that and actually starting those conversations with my staff, right? Inviting them in, not one of those like we do many times in my school district, right? We're just going to give you a PD, this package deal on cultural competency. That'll fix everything, So that's, I don't know how many years we've tried that already. Still hasn't worked yet. So, so in general, like we've got to get inside it. And so how to do that, I think that will also help in my work here.
Yeah. I was going to say briefly to the point, I think both of you spoke to this actually. I was having a conversation with my partner who is a classroom teacher right now. She sort of keeps me grounded in these kinds of things. And I was like, what is the one thing that you feel like would be a useless waste of this session? And she was like, please don't tell them to do any more assemblies or one-off PDs. And the framing there around that is that I think especially as school leaders, right? The way that I imagine that work is that it's about creating systems and structures that even though we've been in this situation for a while, and certainly, especially within certain pockets of the API community, discrimination, hate, xenophobia, these things are not new, right? They just fortunately affect some folks within that umbrella than others. There is a piece, I think, around school leadership that is around being able to be proactive and creating systems and structures that are actually going to outlive and last longer than just the simple sort of reactionary one-off kinds of things. Part of this work is being able to provide a system that actually speaks to students' needs before they need to be sort of like relied upon in a crisis sort of response moment. Cool. Curious to take it to the second and third questions on the slide here as well. You know, is there what feels doable in the next month? In my work as a DEI consultant, we spend a lot of time sort of pushing folks to bucket their ideas into what are some things that feel like they are quick wins that we can, you know, get down and get on the table relatively quickly, and what are some of the longer term commitments? And then I think built into that analysis is, you know, what questions and tensions are you still holding? What questions do you still have about like, how do I actually pull this off? Or like, this seems like it feels kind of right, but not exactly what I was looking for. What else are y'all still thinking about?
I definitely do think the those climate surveys are kind of a quick hitter. They'll definitely give you like a point of view where your school's at, as long as everyone's authentic and honest in their answers. Luckily for me, I think we have a culture of those surveys just to everybody, so people are used to that. So I want to send that out probably within the next couple of weeks, and hopefully, you know, see what comes of it.
Cool. If there's no other thoughts or reactions for now, then I think, Nancy, I think you can go ahead and close us out of here. Actually, I can speak to this part too, actually. Yeah. So yeah, just a couple of ways that y'all can stay in touch. You know, definitely please keep us updated about your work, right? Like I want to hear how those surveys roll out, Anthony. Other ways you can stay in touch with us, you know, like I said earlier, we are still running that Kindness Heals campaign. And so if there's any of your students that want to be a part of that and make a submission, it's a really cool example, a really cool opportunity, excuse me, for them to get their work featured and potentially even get a conversation going with an influencer. So that deadline is up on February 14th. On February 27th, we're going to be having our next leadership convo, which is a mini series of programs we've been developing in partnership with the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the nation's oldest civil rights advocacy organization. And so that's really, really exciting. They'll be spending some more time talking a little bit more about leadership. The first one was around how to address anti-Blackness within our parents and our communities. It was really just a fantastic session. And then finally on May 18th, which I know is a little bit further along, but May 18th is when Act to Change always sort of celebrates, or perhaps commemorates might be a better phrase, our annual Day Against Bullying and Hate. It's sort of one of our flagship virtual events throughout the year, and it's usually one of our most sort of star-studded ones. Last year we had a ton of celebrities and a ton of local and state governments sort of sign on proclamations as well. And it's always just like a great event for folks to come together and build that community online. And like I was saying to earlier, so many times API students are not centered in the conversations around educational inequity for all sorts of reasons. And so just really excited for that event to always be a space where folks can come and really see that community given a spotlight. Yeah, I'm seeing this question in the chat. Thanks for asking. Stop AAPI Hide is new to you. Yeah. They did like a big rebrand of their website a while ago, and I want to make sure I get the right URL here. Yeah, here it is. Just drop that in the chat there. Yeah. And then finally, in case you all want to stay in touch with Nancy or myself, our emails and our LinkedIn's are there, and you have those. You can click onto those from the link that we dropped in the chat earlier, the link to the slide deck. And all of our social and our website information is all there on the right-hand side as well. So that's pretty much all the stuff that Nancy and I had for all of you. We still have a few minutes left, so if there's any other questions or reactions, or happy to open the space up for that, or we can hop a few minutes early here.
Richard and Nancy, thank you. Thank you for having me today. Enjoyed it. I'm going to jump off, but I'm certainly going to get your information off of your off your sheet so that I can continue that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Anthony.
Thank you for joining.
My name.
Nice
Thank you
background.
so much. That was great catching up with you, Nancy. It's good to see you. Thank you, Richard. That was very engaging. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.
Thank
You
you.
too. Thanks for joining.